All right, so your featured speaker is actually me. Normally we have other speakers, but today you're stuck with Corey Wright. So I sort of am involved with 3 different organizations. The primary thing I do is working as a venture catalyst with Oregon Rain. So just like some of you might know Raj or Ariel, that's what I do up here in Linn and Benton counties: connect entrepreneurs to people, programs, resources, all of that. But prior to becoming a venture catalyst, I was actually the founder and CEO, and still am, of a startup called Massif Games. We founded in early 2016. We have about 40 SKUs that we manage. Where our products are sold. So far, have been shipped to 53 different countries, I believe, is what I counted last. And so that's a board game publishing company. And so much of my Kickstarter experience and crowdfunding experience has come from that. And then I'm also the founder owner of a company called Massif Ventures, which does consulting work. And I got some big plans and ideas for it down the road, some other ventures to do. If you haven't noticed, I enjoy the word massive. I like mountains a lot, and I think it makes for really cool business names. So hence the reason 2 of those are there. And then some little fun random facts about me for those of you who don't know. Love traveling, been to 29 different countries. My first startup, so I grew up in rural Dallas, Oregon, was actually a homegrown turkey business. So when I was 8 years old, I came to my parents and I was like, hey, can I buy little turkeys, raise them, butcher them, and sell them to make some money? Which I don't know what 8-year-old comes up with that idea, but growing up on a farm, I did. And so that was my first venture. And since then, obviously, had some more. I actually have a background in chemistry. So I studied chemistry in pre-med and worked at a biotech company in Corvallis for many years, and actually got to fly around the world and do tech transfer, process scale up, all of that, which is pretty fun. Love mountaineering, hiking, married to literally the best woman in the world because we have 2 kids under 2, and she somehow keeps them mostly quiet while I'm here working remotely. So yeah, just a few random facts about me. Looks like we got a few more people joining us, so welcome. And so, let's go over what I want to cover today, just so you guys are sort of have a sense of what this workshop's going to look like. We're going to talk about my background. We're going to do a couple little polls, talk about the different types of crowdfunding, and tell you guys a story and do some pop quizzes, get you guys sort of involved in this. Throughout the workshop, we're going to have different opportunities for questions after like each section, so that I'm not trying to like answer every question as it comes up on the chat, but to also make sure everyone has a chance to engage. And so if you have things that come up, throw them in the chat. And then when we get to like a question section, we can sort of go through and cover some of them. We'll talk about mistakes I've made, things I did right, some crowdfunding tips and tricks, and we'll look at what I think people should be considering trying to crowdfunding during a global pandemic. So that's today's lecture outline. Before we get started, any questions so far? Anybody have any thoughts? Let me check the chat. Nothing so far. Looks like people are good. Okay. So crowdfunding, in some sense, is a newer thing that's been happening lately, but in some senses, it's actually, or some regards, it's something that people have been doing for a long time. Crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, many small communities get together and raise money to build a church or a school or whatever, right? And so it's not necessarily a new thing to humans, but what has changed is how it's much easier with new online apps and websites and marketing techniques to reach a greater crowd than you normally would back in the old days, if you will. So I started doing my initial 3 Kickstarter campaigns that I've done, and then I realized, I've actually done more campaigns than that as far as crowdfunding is concerned. So crowdfunding could be a collage for Africa, where I went and worked with street kids, and I was able to raise money from my local group and paid for my airplane ticket back when I had dreadlocks and looked like a hippie and played soccer a lot and loved, hanging out and going around the bush learning crazy languages and language and all that. Up to like when I worked with international students, getting everyone chip in and donate to buy me a bus license so that I could drive a bus full of all these international students around the Northwest and go look at different beautiful tourism sites, up to helping family members raise funds for my brother's dance school, or my mom to go on a dream vacation for her 50th wedding anniversary. And then obviously the massive displays, the Mountaineers, Cartoffel Creek, those were all done for my company. 2 of these crowdfunding campaigns that are listed here, I actually failed. They did not raise the money they were supposed to raise. And I'll share which ones those are with you later, because I want to get through a couple things first. But I just want to give you, this is my background in crowdfunding. So I've been doing it for the past 10 years, you could say. So poll one, let's go ahead and launch this. And oh, is my audio still bad? Is it better for everyone?
You're good now. It was cutting out quite a bit, but you're better.
Okay. And yeah, and Stephanie, if it cuts out again, just interrupt me and let me know so I can repeat stuff. I do tend to talk a little bit quickly too, so I'll try to slow down a little bit. All right, so here's a little poll. Let's have everyone take this real quick. Just let me know. I want to see who all is here and who my audience is. So are you guys able to take that? All right, great. Looks like it's coming in. Yeah, so I have super fast internet download speeds, but unfortunately Xfinity gives me really crappy upload speeds. And I think upload is probably what's important to get audio quality to be good. All right, 9 out of 13 voted. Got one more guest joining us.
Are you recording or is Stephanie recording?
I'm recording the workshop.
Okay, in that case, the audio should be fine on the video.
Yeah, and I have it comes down to my remote computer, or my computer. I don't put it in the cloud either. So, all right, great. So 11 out of 15 here voted. Great. If anyone else wants to take the poll, otherwise. All right, one last person. Awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and share these results. So it looks like we got a couple people not planning, just here to learn. We got 4 people wanting to launch a crowdfunding campaign in the next 4 months, and a couple people, 3 people in 2 months. Okay, great. So that's good to know. A couple people wanting to do something soon. A couple people have launched a failed crowdfunding campaign before. Nice. I love failure. It's how we learn, how we get better. So congrats. I failed, you failed, it's all good. And you want to learn more. A bunch of people want to see if a crowdfunding campaign is right for me. Okay, thank you for taking that. So let's move on, and I'm going to real quick cover, there's a bunch of different types of crowdfunding, okay? And there's different ways to think about it, and some of these different platforms can cover sort of a broad variety of projects. But how I tend to think of it is that over on the left, you have what often people refer to as product-based. I think a better term for this is actually project-based, because typically you're funding a project. It could be a board game, it could be a new restaurant, it could be a movie or a film or a piece of art or whatever it might be. But there's a project and you need a certain amount of funds to get that project to happen. And then somewhere on the very far end of the scale, you have equity-based. So you're raising funds for direct investment into your company, and then you get to do whatever you want with the money. Typically, you're saying, hey, we're going to be this type of company, and we're using the money for marketing or for manufacturing or whatever. But the thing is, whoever gives you money, they're not getting an immediate product or project out of it. Instead, they're getting ownership in your company. And then somewhere in the middle, you have cause-based. And sometimes you can have project-based, cause-based companies, right? But sometimes they're personal causes or causes for a nonprofit or a social or environmental thing that you really care about, a cause you care about. And so I sort of put this is how I view each of these platforms. Over on the left, you got Kickstarter, which is really all about having a project. Kickstarter basically, for the most part, requires that you give a reward out to each backer that backs your project. So if you're going to be a restaurant, you have to give them a reward of like having their name engraved on a chair or whatever it might be. If you're a board game company, you ship out a game after you've created it, right? Tends to be project-based. Indiegogo can be sort of both. It can be between project and cause-based. A lot of people will choose Indiegogo for sort of a cause or to raise just some funds to support what they're doing. Kickstarter requires what's called an all or nothing funding model. So basically you set a goal, try to raise that amount. And if you raise that amount, then people's money gets withdrawn from their bank accounts. If you don't raise that amount, then the whole campaign fails and no one's money is put on the line. Indiegogo and GoFundMe, you have the option to raise below your actual goal. In my personal opinion, I think it's better to have a goal and like stick with that goal, because I think that instills trust in your crowd of like, hey, we know this guy's thought this out, and that if they hit this funding, they'll actually be able to do it. Because the worst thing you want to happen is, say you have a project that takes $20,000 to complete, you raise $10,000, you keep that money, you go spend that money, and you can't complete that project, and then you're liable to your backers. They can sue you, you get a bad brand, people don't want to fund you again, bad things can happen. You have sites like Patreon that are good for artists and YouTubers. I have a friend, he's a YouTuber over on the East Coast. He lives on an island and he makes giant swords. And he has people that back him on Patreon. And in return for their yearly backing, he makes YouTube videos about what he's doing and makes them custom swords. So he films himself making a custom sword, ships the sword to the person, moves on to the next person. Sort of helps artists and creators be supported in continually generating content and art. You have GoFundMe, which are used for a broad variety of things, but typically are used for personal causes. Sometimes they're used for businesses. There's a movie theater or a drive-in theater up in Dallas, Oregon, where I'm from. They launched a GoFundMe a couple of years ago. Businesses can do this. GoFundMe has less restrictions on what you can do with the capital, but again, you also need to be able to instill trust in your community. Then over on the far right, we got some platforms like Rocket Hub and Fundable, and these are primarily for larger campaigns. I think the max you can raise under the different, at least in the USA, for totally spacing, the Security Commission Exchange or whatever, I think it's like around $1 million. It's like slightly over $1 million. These, I would also caution you, like on the surface, raising money for equity from a crowd can sound sort of appealing. It's like, okay, instead of having to go and pitch a venture capitalist or get a funder or a lender to give me money, I can just try to raise a bunch of money from a bunch of people and then use that. And that could be good. And there's some cases where I think it could be a decent strategy, but then also remember, you now have thousands of shareholders who are all amateur investors, most likely, and have a direct interest and influence in your company that you're beholden to. And so it can create a lot more stress. And then also just legally, there's a lot more requirements that you have to do. And it's a lot harder to set up. So I'm not an expert on those platforms, so I won't really touch on them too much, at least not from a logistics standpoint. What I would mention with respect to Oregon is there's something called the Oregon Intrastate Offering Exemption. This is something you can look up. There's legislation that was passed, I want to say 6 years ago or so, that basically allows Oregon businesses to crowdfund either as equity or as a loan up to $250,000 from their community, as long as every single backer is an Oregonian. They have an Oregon driver's license. And here's the key thing. Normally, for someone to invest in your business, they have to be an accredited investor, okay? They have to have over $1 million in assets, or have 300K in annual revenue if they're married, 200K if they're single, things like that, right? By this exemption, you're able to raise up to $2,500 max per person, up to 250K total, and have that either be as equity or as a loan, and you set the terms. So all it really requires is getting a little bit of legal help to draft a prospectus, get it reviewed by a small business development center coach or someone who's qualified with the state of Oregon to do that, and then launch it, make sure everyone who wants to contribute money is able to do so as an Oregon resident, and then you can raise some funds. So this is something that only a few companies in Oregon have done, and something Oregon Ring has actually been working on, trying to see if we could help facilitate a live website for the state of Oregon that would make this easier. So there'd be some hoops to jump through, but personally, let's say if I were gonna start a restaurant or a coffee shop in a community that didn't have one, this is something that I would maybe look at that and say, okay, let's get this whole community invested in being part owners with me of this coffee shop and launch it and see what we can do. So that's sort of a really generic, quick overview of the different types of crowdfunding. Again, my experience has been mostly from sort of the GoFundMe cause-based side as well as the Kickstarter side. I've used Indiegogo for sort of post campaign, so you can do you can take a campaign that's successful and just do another campaign on a different platform. So I've used Indiegogo for that. But honestly, Indiegogo does not have the market share. Some of their features of their platform are really great, but they just don't have the same market share. And in part, that's because they don't require projects to be capped or have a goal that you actually have to meet. So that's my 2 cents worth. You know, GoFundMe and Kickstarter are my go-to things. And again, if I were going to try to crowdfund equity in Oregon, I would probably not even do it as equity. I'd do it as a loan and do it with the Oregon intrastate offering. So I know that was a lot. Let's do another poll. And if anyone has any questions, it looked like Ada was asking what the name of this program is. So this is a virtual workshop on crowdfunding during COVID-19. Let me launch this next poll.
I think Aida was asking the Oregon intrastate
Okay, yeah.
program.
It's called the Oregon Intrastate Offering. Here, I'll move back a slide. And if you reach out to Ada, I think you work with Raj, right? So if you reach out to him, he can send you a bunch of links and documents on that, or I can at the end of this. So let's open up this second poll. Launch polling. So just so I have a sense, because I know there's a bunch of you thinking about doing a crowdfunding campaign. So what kind of crowdfunding campaign are you considering right now? So if you guys don't mind taking that. Mark Davis, I'm not sure what I just said because like I mentioned, I maybe talked too fast, but I do have slides that I will be sending out to everyone at the end of this. And just as a reminder for those of you who joined late, this is also being recorded and will be on our YouTube channel. All right, 9 out of 16. Let's see if we can get a couple more people to vote here. So what type of crowdfunding campaign do you wish to do? Well, it looks most of you are trying to do something that I actually have experience doing. So that's always a good sign. Okay, 13 out of 16. Let's go ahead and close this down. Share the results. So it looks like a bunch of people doing a product or project. So that's 9. So most of you, great. And then a couple social causes. And for those of you who put social cause, why don't you throw in the chat what kind of social cause you're looking at raising money for, just so I can get a sense for that. And then a couple people equity-based. So if maybe that equity-based person wants to throw in what they're thinking about, I'd be curious just to see. Jerry, the Oregon YouTube channel, I don't know if you can see the chat history, but that is up higher. So that would be up there. Vicky, you want to raise funds to start a church? All right. And hire a local fire department that had equipment stolen. Okay, nice, I like it. Good causes. So, okay, let me end these results. And let's dig into the next slides. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you guys a story and then I'm gonna ask you a question. So these are 2 campaigns that I launched back in a couple years ago. So one's called Mountaineers. It's a 3D board game. It's like 18 inches tall, and it's something I came up with while I was hiking in the French Alps. I spent roughly 2.5 years working on this project. It was a little bit of a passion project. Developing it, I went around to a bunch of different game events, and I would have people play test it. I shared it, had game conventions, people sign up for my emailing list, all of that. And yeah, really spent 2.5 years working on this, trying to get it to grow, and sent it to reviewers, all of that. And then in November, right before the holiday season, actually, I launched this campaign. Okay, in Kartoffelkrieg, which is German for Potato Wars. This is a game that I licensed to my company. It's a really hilarious game where you take like these weapons and you stick them into potatoes, and then you like drive the potatoes around a kitchen table and like shoot up the other potatoes and make potato salad afterwards, right? So it's a hilarious concept made by that same guy I mentioned who makes giant swords. He came up with it. So like he put it out on Imager and Facebook, and it blew up. It got 100,000 shares from just his prototype pictures overnight, right? And so I saw that, and I was like, the dollar signs went off in my eyes. It's like, okay, I'm gonna grab this. I'm gonna license this from him. We're gonna launch this and make this a full-blown game. Like, this is gonna be crazy. And I spent about 3 months preparing for this campaign, sent it to reviewers, you know, did the thing, went to trade shows and game conventions and shared the game there and got people to play it, got feedback. And then I, you know, launched them. So I want you guys in the chat real quick to tell me which of these campaigns do you think was successful and which one do you think failed? Or at least which one do you think was the most successful? Just put it in the chat. Just say Mountain or Potato Wars if you don't want to try to spell Kartoffelkrieg. Mountain, potato, mountain. And of course, no looking up online, right? That's cheating. Potato, Mountaineers. So we got maybe slightly more for Mountaineers. One person thinks maybe one was successful, but probably the potato. Mountain, yes. Potato, no. Like it. Okay, so yeah, let's see. What was it? So hopefully my slides do what I need them to do. Okay, so it turns out that Mountaineers was wildly successful and the potato game was not so successful. So Mountaineers launched it November 7th, ended it December 7th, I believe. And we were able to hit 364% funded, raised 145K. I actually raised another 45K after that in their pledge manager. And I'll talk about what a pledge manager is in a little bit. You know, thousands of backers, and took 2.5 years of preparation. Kartoffelkrieg didn't fund. It maybe could have funded, but I canceled it halfway through the campaign because the reality was, even though I had a $19,000 goal, I really needed more like 40,000 to break even because of all the expenses I had put in. And I really wanted the campaign to blow up, not just barely succeed. So I rather wanted to stop it and try again versus have something that like was just mediocre and not that exciting, right? But here's the big thing that you're going to notice. And I would say that one of the biggest reasons for one of them succeeding, one of them failing. One I spent 2.5 years preparing for. The other one I spent 3 months preparing for. So even though Kartoffelkrieg blew up on social media, that actually means nothing if you don't know your community, who your crowd is, and what they're looking for when you launch a campaign. So remember this, if nothing else, the trick to a successful crowdfunding campaign on really any platform is in the pre-campaign preparation. It's everything you do beforehand. The campaign itself is often pretty short. It can be 30 days, 40 days, 15 days, you know, whatever you set it to be. So the real work for a campaign is in the beginning. And you need to be prepared for all the different outcomes that a Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaign could have, right? You need to be ready for, what if this doesn't fund? How do I gracefully stop this campaign, keep everyone who did back interested for relaunching it, and do it in a way that I still gain trust and want my community to stick with me for future funding outcomes? What is going to happen if it barely funds? Am I going to be able to make this happen and get it out to my customers or whatever it is? And then also, like, if this goes, you know, WTF, blows up and you're just inundated with emails and people wanting to buy it for their game stores and all of this stuff, are you prepared to manage that, to manage the shipping, all of those different things? And so it's really tough. Crowdfunding campaigns are tough because you need to prepare for all of these scenarios. There's no magic mirror. The more hard work and preparation you do, definitely the better your chances of success are. But nonetheless, like you know, when I launched Kartoffelkrieg, I thought it was going to blow up. And maybe part of it is because I didn't prepare enough. But part of it was also, there's this other like game, it was like Fireball Island. A bunch of people remembered playing this game back in the 70s, 80s when they were kids. And that campaign raised like $7 million. And everyone's money who's normally backing random indie game projects was going to that project. So there's a lot less funding in the Kickstarter platform for my game and other people's games, right? So there's always these different variables that can happen, a global pandemic, right? Things that come up. And so you really need to be prepared for all of those scenarios. So let's take a little pause here. Where are we at? We're at halfway through the hour. So Jeanette had a comment. Yeah, so that was the other thing, is I didn't really know my audience that well. And so I assumed that people on Kickstarter would want to back a funny game, but people on Kickstarter really want to back really cool, complex games. And the Potatoes Wars, I didn't well portray its complexity that it did have. Anybody have any questions or want to mute yourself just real quick if you have a question before we move on to the next part? How are we doing? See, I don't see anyone unmuting. I'm going to take that for a no unless someone is ready to go. Okay. So let's do a quick pop quiz. So get ready, enter some things. Here's the first question. What do you think is the most important part of a crowdfunding page or website? And then while you're answering that, Vicky's asking, what type of funding is good to use to start a church? Well, Vicky, I would need to know more about what you mean by starting a church. I mean, some churches meet in homes, some build buildings. It would sort of depend on what you need the funding for specifically. If you're going to use a building, I would probably say maybe Kickstarter would be good. That said, Kickstarter does have some restrictions for nonprofits, so maybe you need to go Indiegogo. Okay, a building. Another option really, and this is where I don't have as much expertise, but if it's a church, you can probably form a 501c3 and just collect tax deductible donations to do it and sort of crowdfund from the local community. So that might be a good way to go as well. Okay, so some people, the story, most important thing is a nice video, easily accessible information. Let's see what we got. Compelling narrative, capturing excitement. All right, so some different answers, understanding target market. Yeah, okay, remember like of the page website. So think about the visuals you'd be seeing there. So most people, when I ask this question, they say, oh, the most important part is the video. Or they'll say, well, the most important part is all the content that you have on the website. So this is a trick question because the answer is every aspect of your crowdfunding page and website is important. Don't skip anything. If you look at the data for what people look at on online crowdfunding campaigns, about 50% will say like they watch the video right away, and that's what they look at first and helps them decide if they're going to click fund. And the other half don't even bother with the video. They just start scrolling and they want to see, you know, what's going on. But here's the key thing, especially on places like Kickstarter, the average backer will decide in roughly 15 seconds if they're going to fund your campaign. Backers, especially on Kickstarter, are sort of knee-jerk, fad of the new. If this looks exciting and sexy and there's a good message and appeal to it, I'll click I want it, right? So it's important, again, doing your pre-campaign preparation to really build not just an awesome video, but a really awesome page. So let's do another little pop quiz here. All right, why should you launch a Kickstarter campaign? So why do you think you would go for Kickstarter versus any other way of raising money or figuring out funding? Any thoughts? And if you guys want to unmute yourself and just shout out an answer, that's totally fine. Anyone? You don't have to pay it back. Well, that's sort of true. I mean, you have to provide a product, right? So you could have to pay it back. Well-known platform. People are interested in funding things. Yeah. More market value. Yeah, so Sarah, basically market validation, right? Like, can you get enough money to actually make this a successful business venture? Maybe one other answer. Setting up for a successful marketing platform. Yeah, growing your community. So my answer is probably not quite what you're expecting, but this, I might be biased. I would say the only reason you should launch a Kickstarter campaign, or I should have used the words crowdfunding campaign, is because it's the only option left, or because it's part of your product validation and or marketing strategy, okay? A lot of people think that a crowdfunding campaign is a way to make easy money. And I'm here to tell you that none of that money you get is easy, and it's stressful and it's tough. And honestly, if you could just have one bank that lends you that money at a decent interest rate, and you can like go forward with that, that's a heck of a lot easier, and it's going to save you so much time, therefore letting you hopefully make more money down the road if you have a solid business plan. Okay, Kickstarters, crowdfunding, it's a ton of work. So don't think that you can just throw something up online within a couple days and then all of a sudden get $140,000 like I did, right? I spent 2.5 years prepping my crowd, building my mailing list up to a couple thousand people, and I was $10,000 in credit card debt before I launched that. And even then I didn't know if it was going to be successful. And then once I launched it, I was 60 hours a week on my computer responding to thousands of questions and emails and posting content and engaging and thanking people. And then for 2 years after that, I was busy making the product, fulfilling it, answering questions from people who are mad that they hadn't got it yet, dealing with production issues and manufacturing, all of these things, and trying to keep the community excited, dealing with refunds, right? So crowdfunding can be stressful and it can be additional work, not to mention 5% if you're on Kickstarter is going directly to Kickstarter, plus another 3 to 5% for processing fees. So that $140,000 that I raised on Kickstarter, Kickstarter got a nice big fat $15,000 check, and then another check went to the pledge manager and all of this, right? So if you can get money from like 1 or 2 people versus 2,000 people, it can be a lot easier to deal with it. So I'm not trying to say you shouldn't launch a crowdfunding campaign, but what I am trying to say is be aware of how much work it takes to actually pull one off. So what's the secret to a successful crowdfunding campaign? There's one secret. It's not really a secret. It's pretty much common sense, but this is the one that most people forget about when they try to do something. So let's see. What do you guys think? What's the secret? Follow through, communication. Hard work, that helps. Maybe a couple more answers. Set goals and do it. Yeah, it's nice to set goals, but when you're waiting on like 1,000 other people to help you reach those goals, you can't just do it yourself, right? Hard work. Okay, so the secret to, one more answer, effectively managing the campaign. Yeah, that's helpful. But the real secret, this is going to be a no duh, is you got to bring your crowd with you, okay? It's a crowdfunding campaign. It requires a crowd. A lot of people think that, oh, I can just throw this up on Kickstarter or GoFundMe or whatever, and then I'll be able to, if I have a nice video and a nice website and all that, people are going to be excited and just start giving me money. In reality, you need to spend at least 6 months before you launch on that day one launch date, getting the crowd psyched and ready to be there, okay? There's some stats that I have. Where I have those stats on the next page. There's some stats I have that basically you ideally need to have 30% of your funding on day one of your crowdfunding campaign, okay, to even be successful. And ideally, you try to hit 100% of your goal within the first 48 hours if you want to raise additional money on top of your goal. So the key is not launching a campaign and then being like, hey, everyone, come here. Instead, it's being like, hey, everyone, we're going to launch a campaign. Here's the day we're going to do it, and getting everyone psyched up so that, like in my case, I had people literally waiting, trying to click the button to be the first backer on my campaign because they were excited about that Mountaineers game and they wanted to be a part of it. So the key is really, again, in the pre-campaign preparation, bring your crowd with you. And there's a great book, I'll reference it later, by Jamie Stagmeyer, and he talks about this. And his whole concept is you got to bring the crowd with you if you want to crowdfund. So if we look back to those 7 campaigns that I've done, the ones that failed or barely made it. So in this case, Kartoffelkrieg did not work, right? We had to cancel it. That's because I didn't really know my crowd. I had a game that was more focused on like teenagers, and I was trying to get 30, 40-year-old gamers on Kickstarter to back for it. If I had really done the work beforehand, getting lots of people to play it and excited about it and building up that support and really knowing who my customer was, it probably would have had a better success rate. That said, I learned a lot of lessons, and I think moving forward, if I were to do it again, I have a good understanding of what it would take to make that happen. I tried to raise some money for my mom's vacation. My mom works really hard. She doesn't have a lot of income. I wanted to help her celebrate her 50th birthday. And guess what? That failed because my mom wasn't really sharing the GoFundMe that I made for her. And my community of people mostly weren't people that knew my mom or were excited and prepped and prepared for this big birthday celebration thing, right? If my mom had been sharing it with her community and got everyone prepped for it, it probably could have succeeded, but it didn't. So again, on the massive displays that barely funded, I knew my crowd for the most part. I spent very little time beforehand getting them excited about it. And like I had to do some shortcuts, which are not necessarily recommended to make that campaign happen. And long story short, it worked out and I have a product and that product actually sells on a regular basis. But nonetheless, you gotta bring your crowd with you. Nothing else from today. If my voice is just sort of something droning in the background as you're working on emails, remember this, you gotta bring your crowd with you. So, any questions so far? Anyone wanna unmute and ask something? Or should we just dig into the next part? All right, well, if anyone has something, go ahead and throw it in the chat and I'm gonna get started on the next part. So let's talk about some mistakes I've made so that hopefully you don't make them too. So the first thing is, and I just mentioned this, you gotta know who your backer actually is. Like, who are you selling this product to? Who are you raising money for your church? Who is benefiting from the fire department having new tools, right? Like whatever the cause is, who's the person that really is going to be vested in this campaign? Don't try to do business-to-business products on Kickstarter, generally speaking, if you can help it. There might be some exceptions. For example, if you know that a lot of, let's say, videographers or independent creators are on Kickstarter and they have their own businesses and your product would fit with their businesses, that might be an okay case to do that. But in general, business-to-business products are really tough to crowdfund, in my experience. Not having a sexy product. Most crowdfunding campaigns, whether it's on Kickstarter or GoFundMe or whatever, they're trying to do something new or make something happen that couldn't happen otherwise, right? So if you're trying to sell like a t-shirt that's a slightly different color from someone else's t-shirt but has your logo on it so that you can make some extra bucks for your business, you might get some backers, you might get some local fans who really want to support you, but overall, you're not going to have something that can really blow up and create a lot of revenue because it's not new, and it's not sexy, and you're not becoming a part of something cool by actually doing that. Another mistake I made is I hired a consultant the day before I launched my big campaign. And there was some good advice this person provided, but there was also some bad advice. And if I had been smart, I probably would have found a couple experts to mentor me before I even launched. And run things by them. I had a team that was running things by, and I was involved in like some blogs and stuff that I would ask questions in, but don't hire a consultant the day before and let them tell you to make a bunch of changes and then make those changes. Sometimes you should go with your gut. Stretch goals. So I don't know how many of you know what stretch goals are, but let's say you reach 100% of your funding. Sometimes you can get additional money by promising extra goals. Like let's use the t-shirt example. You have a generic t-shirt, you reach the funding for that, and then you say, okay, now we're gonna make 3 different color options available if we reach another $2,000 above our goal, right? That would be an example of a stretch goal, but you really should have an idea of what the stretch goals are before you launch your campaign and the pricing for them and how many backers you need to reach and all of that, so that you're not making it up as you go and potentially creating more work, which results in delays of your campaign later down the road. Some additional, let's take a question here. It looks like I'm looking for funds to enable my business. Yeah.
Could you, Aida has a question.
Yep, I was just reading it. So
Perfect.
I'm looking for funds to enable my business to buy a Grange and do the remodel, rent it out, so what is the question? Maybe Aida,
she wanted to know which crowdfunding, funding opportunity would be best suited for her.
Gotcha. I don't want to necessarily blanket statements and say one thing or another without knowing your situation more, Aida. But my gut would say, like, first see if you can use like some type of traditional funding at low interest rate that will support your business model and save you the work of a crowdfunding campaign. if you were to do a crowdfunding campaign, I would figure out what is going to be most easy and suitable for the local businesses that maybe are going to be pitching in for this, and the community members, and what kind of platforms do they use? Do they even use websites and Kickstarter and things like that to give money in? Do they feel comfortable with that? And then also, I guess, not knowing if it would be a nonprofit versus a commercial business. Like, there's a bunch of different considerations. So maybe hit me up afterwards and we can dig into that more. Some additional mistakes that I've made is not creating custom URLs. So you can actually create custom URLs and then track those. So let's say on Kickstarter, you got your normal URL, but then you can create a separate URL that says like Facebook ads. Use that one and put it in your Facebook ads. And then you can see, okay, how many of these backers came from Facebook versus how many came from somewhere else. And you can use Google Analytics as well. But also for, if you have like different blogs that you're working with, you can create custom URLs for them. And then you can see, okay, that blogger is really reaching a lot of people that are donating to my campaign. Maybe I should do some more with him or her and strike up a relationship or something, right? Be sure if you're doing an actual product or project that you send out review samples to reviewers, and or that you give people a taste of what it's going to be like to get that hype out there. Make sure you have frequently asked questions prepared before you launch. So like test it out on a couple people that don't know very much about your project, and then see what kind of questions they're asking. Like people might be asking like, are you going to have a pledge manager? What happens if the product fails? When are you going to deliver to France? When are you going to deliver to Germany? You know, little things like that. During campaigns, you can do different voting polls to sort of engage your audience. You could be like, hey, using our t-shirt example, do you guys want to do green t-shirts or do you want to do red t-shirts? Okay. Sometimes these polls can be really fun ways to engage your community, but make sure you don't create winners or losers. Make sure like if you have to go with like the green t-shirt, all the people who wanted the red one aren't going to be like super pissed and leave your campaign or back out. Okay. Also, especially now during COVID-19, be sure to think about currency shipping rate exchanges, because those are changing. And if you have a campaign that's going to take 2 years to fulfill, those prices could really go up. And I see we're getting to 2:48, so I probably should speed things up, maybe skip over a couple slides here. Keep things simple. Don't use low quality pledge managers. Those are websites that basically collect people's information at the end. Now, you can sometimes just collect people's information by using your own website or Kickstarter or whatever. But the advantage of using a pledge manager is you can import those backers and then upsell them additional products and therefore get some more money. Make sure you set up your contracts with manufacturers really well. And then also, you know, don't stare at your computer too long all day long. I gained a lot of weight and I probably clicked refresh too much on many of my Kickstarter campaigns. So just make sure you stay mentally healthy because they're really draining. I'm going to keep going, but if anyone has any questions, definitely throw them in the chat and I'll grab those out. A couple things I did right. Thanked each backer individually. I was myself. That's really important, is if you're trying to pretend to be someone you're not, backers will see through that, so be authentic. Have shipping icons. If you're doing a product, tell people where you're shipping to. Make sure they know that, like, hey, if I live in Australia, like I should pay attention because I can get this duty free or whatever. Be active in the comment section. My goal is I always respond to every single comment a Kickstarter backer gives me, even 2 years later, within 24 hours, okay? And fortunately, Kickstarter actually improved it to where you can respond to individual comments. It used to be you just have to like put it in the cyberspace and hope that the person who asked the question can actually see it. I don't think Kickstarter offers functionality anymore, but doing live videos throughout your campaign is a really great way for your community to meet you and ask questions and get more involved. Use Google Analytics. You can set it up with a book video or Kickstarter to do that. Give away free product to reviewers and influential people. Do experiments. Sounds wonky again. Can everyone else hear me all right? Okay.
You're good now.
All right. So give free product away to reviewers, influencers. Do competitions and things where like, hey, if we get 50 people to like my Facebook page, we'll throw in this extra product for everyone. Or will reach this number. You know, fun things to really engage your community, like stretch goals, which we talked about earlier. And then this one is key. Don't respond to marketing help emails. If you launch a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you're going to get like 20 emails a day from these agencies that say they are going to be able to boost your campaign by like 1,000%. And they're all lies. They're all spam. Almost none of them work. You can spend hours and hours researching each of them like I did, or you can just learn from me and just say no to anyone you don't have a personal relationship with already. Pledge managers, again, can really make people excited to back, because some people might not have money at the time that you're launching your Kickstarter or your Indiegogo, but they want to be able to back at a later point. So if you set it up to where, hey, anyone can chip $1 in now, and then when we open up our pledge manager, you'll have the chance to pay for the full product then, you can actually get more backers and more people engaged. I like to make the announcement that we'll use a pledge manager sort of midway through the campaign, but you could probably just do it in the beginning and save yourself the hassle of answering questions. Getting Project We Love by Kickstarter is really great. Oops. That's basically someone working for Kickstarter, looking at all the new projects that launch that day and clicking a like button if they see something they like. It's pretty random. I felt really fortunate. It took me 5 days to get that. I think having a campaign that like highlights social issues and is really unique increases your chance of getting that designation. And the nice thing about that designation is it puts you up higher in the algorithms, so more people are seeing your campaign. Make sure you have professional websites and references that are linked to from your campaign, so that people can check up on you and say, okay, is this guy a legit person, or is he just going to take my money and run away? Okay. And then, obviously, really important, surround yourself with a great team of people, even if it's just for the duration of the campaign. Like, add people that can help you answer questions and mentally support you and all of that. All right. Well, I obviously put in way too much content. You can tell I'm passionate about this topic. So hopefully you guys are all getting really great information out of this and not just dragging on. So the meat of this presentation, crowdfunding during COVID-19. Okay. So there's some pros and some cons. There's probably more to this, and I'm definitely curious if any of you guys have thoughts on this. But here's what I see as both pros and cons, and then I'll get into some recommendations of what I would look for if I was going to launch a campaign today. So cons, right? Consumer spending's down, retail spending's down. People are holding on to their money. They're worried about the future. They don't want to spend money on things that aren't essential, okay? Media coverage is almost all focused on the pandemic. So getting someone to like cover a cool story about a local company doing a crowdfunding campaign is going to be a lot tougher, unless perhaps it's related to that pandemic. You're going to have manufacturing delays. Even if you're in the USA, it's possible you're going to have manufacturing in the USA. You're probably still going to have manufacturing delays, supply chain delays. It's really hard to fulfill products and ship it out right now. Like, I mean, everything like you were on Amazon Prime, like it used to always be like 2 to 3 days. Now it's like sometimes 2, sometimes 2 weeks, right? You can also, if you're not careful, send the wrong tone. If you have like a product that's sort of insensitive to the current climate that we're in, and you're like launching a crowdfunding campaign to try to just make a bunch of money and launch a product for your game, and you're like insensitive to what's going on, that could send a wrong tone, and people might not want to share or promote that because they have neighbors and businesses next door that need their help more, right? And then also, you always have this, but there's even higher risk and uncertainty right now, right? We're looking at like a recession at least until the end of 2021. Who knows what's going to happen with a bunch of different things. Regulations can change. Shipping and relationships between countries can change. If you're going to be manufacturing somewhere else, you could see huge currency fluctuations, right? Which those have affected me in the past, even just at smaller scales. So you really are going to want to build a lot of buffers into all of these items if you're going to launch. But there's some pros too, right? And one of the biggest pros is that more people are at home and online. So if you're doing an online crowdfunding campaign, you might actually be able to reach more people, and even more people who are working at home like might be tempted to go look at Kickstarter and see what's new and contribute and be part of that community, okay? Some people might see spending power increase if they weren't super hurt and they can work from home and they got like the government checks in the mail, right? Maybe they have some more money to spend on your crowdfunding campaign. There's also more empathy for business owners and startups, more than I've seen in a really long time. There's opportunity to negotiate costs with certain companies, because maybe certain companies, their products have stopped selling, so maybe you can get a better deal for your raw materials, right? Less people are doing crowdfunding campaigns right now, at least in the board game industry, and it looks to me like in other industries as well. And the benefit of that is, well, you have less competition online. So if you're the only crowdfunding campaign and you're able to take that risk, then you might actually be able to reap the benefits of that and have more people engage. So it's, again, it's sort of a bet. Like in the game industry, they say never launch a campaign during holiday season. And so everyone doesn't do that, and they like launch during the spring mostly. So then there's always like 1 or 2 campaigns that like decide to launch in December, and they do really well because people are bored, they're at home, they're like, oh, that looks cool, I think I'll contribute and be part of that campaign. Online purchases are up, so more and more people are getting used to buying things online than ever before, right? And then demand for some sectors are up. So if you have like a health related product, if you have a thing that helps people focus on work at home, if you have toilet paper recycling machine, you know, whatever, like there's going to be certain sectors of industries that you might actually have more demand for, and it could be a good time to launch if when you fulfill that product or finish that campaign, it's still going to be applicable to that customer. Let's see. So should you crowdfund right now? So this is sort of my checklist of things that I personally would want to be able to check off before I launch the campaign. First, like I would want to make sure my community is already built. I would want to know that I have enough people excited and ready to like join me at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning and hit 30% of my funding the first day. Like, so if you assume that your e-commerce or your email conversion rate is 5%, like whatever that needs to be, you should have your total email list be that big, right? I want to know that my target crowd is not getting financially impacted. So and make sure they actually have money to spend on things. So if like I'm targeting a product for restaurant owners, not a good time to do a campaign, okay? I want to make my product or project pricing beyond the low end anyways, because again, people are holding on to their money more than before. So I would be really hesitant to do a crowdfunding campaign that's like a $300 minimum buy-in for an item versus something that's like 20 bucks. Make sure it's something new and exciting. Like even if you're trying to raise money for your business that is hurting because of this campaign, have that money go to something new or exciting that's going to create a different thing that people can be a part of. Don't just like be like, oh, let's raise money to keep my business alive. Like, that could work. And I'm not saying it's bad that you would want to do that, but I'm saying you're going to be able to engage more people if you can be like, hey, my business is hurting, we're in rough times, but we want to stay alive and build this awesome outdoor patio for all of you to enjoy beer on, or whatever it is, right? Like make it so you're still creating something new and exciting that when you're done, people can be like, yeah, I was a part of that. And make sure, especially for project-based ones, that your crowd's going to be okay waiting 1 to 2 years for things to finish. Because even if you think you can fulfill a product right now in 6 months, it'll take twice as long as that, and then add a pandemic, and it might take even longer. And I see we're basically running out of time. Looks like there's a question. What are the different incentives you can give beyond ownership in your company? Again, that totally depends on your campaign. I would always recommend that you not do things that aren't related to your main goal. So like something that you'll see a lot of first-time crowdfunders do is like, you have a board game project and you're like, I'm going to make this board game. And you're like, oh, and I'm going to make a t-shirt and a hat and cool sunglasses and everything to go along with this. And that's actually a distraction from your main project. You should really focus on that thing, have 2 to 3 reward levels max, and have what you're trying to crowdfund be what you're giving to your customers. These are some other things that I would look at: have a small plan, be prepared for the time and resources, make sure that this is the best option you have for funding, and make sure that you're going to be appealing to people and that it's timely. So I'm almost done here. So thanks everyone for sticking with me so far. Just remember that there's a ton of work and they cause less stress, and that work continues a long time. It shouldn't be part of your it should be part of your long-term strategy, not just trying to make easy money, spend a lot of time preparing, do your own research and make your own decisions. I mean, this is what I'm telling you, but if you have a gut feel, the nice thing about crowdfunding is that you really are low risk at failure. If failure happens, it's not going to be horrible if you do it right. Now, obviously, if you spend money on a marketing video and your page and graphics and all that, I mean, you could lose that, but you're not going to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars by trying to crowdfund, typically speaking. It's great when there's non-traditional methods available. So, I mean, that's why I did it. No investor really wanted to invest in a board game company, but I had a product and I believed in it. And I went and showed them that, hey, there is a demand for this. And, you know, at the end of the day, and this is sort of my last thing I'll close with, is they can be really extremely rewarding. Like, yes, you're stressed. You have 2,000 people that are all wondering why the heck you haven't shipped their game to them yet. And you're stressed out of your mind working 80 hours a week. But on the other hand, when you get that like physical product or that project completed and everyone's like, this is awesome, we're excited about it, it feels really good. So, you know, for all the negatives and warnings I put in here, it can be really fun. So that's really all I have. I have some tools and tricks. You guys can check out these links in the slides when I send them out later today, different things that I like to look at and tricks I do. Again, if you're really interested in launching a crowdfunding campaign, I'd love to set up a 1-hour appointment with you and dig in deeper and see what makes sense and what your strategy can sort of be for that. So with that, I'll just open it up for final questions and discussion.